the Forbidden Blender.
The old woman was staring at Charlie, her tiny eyes darting wildly from behind giant spectacles. He didn't feel her stare till he adjusted his legs and turned his head to look at the other side of the park. His gaze met hers. She had gray hair done up in a perm and carried a distended bag of groceries. He was about to ask her what she wanted, but she shook her head disapprovingly and turned around before Charlie had the chance.
"What gave you those scratches?"
A little boy in blue pointed. The 3 jagged marks that extended up his forearm from 3 deep punctures at the base looked painful. Charlie turned his arm around, shielding it from sight. "Stupid questions?"
"What's a stupid question?"
the boy asked. "Piss off, kid." The child turned around, seemingly unperturbed, and made a beeline for the dog that had just entered the park with its owners. Charlie sighed deeply and closed his eyes. He felt the breeze slip in between his jacket and his sweater. Nights were longer, days were shorter. He pulled out his phone and checked the digital display. He could hear distant thunder. Time to go. He stood up and started walking. He ran his fingers along the railing at the exit of the park and felt the coolness of the metal as he passed by. He walked a few blocks to the nearest subway station. He stood in front of the screen of the ticket machine, reflexively jabbing the touchscreen. It needed $5. He pulled out his wallet. $6 peeked back at him. On his third try shoving the paper into the machine, it gobbled it up and spit out his refilled card. Glancing over his shoulder as he stepped aside, he saw a young woman with a frantic look on her face. She was asking everyone around if they had change to fill up her card. She just needed to get home. She didn't have time to walk. She just needed $1 more, she pleaded on the verge of tears, her hand strangling the coins and wrinkled bills in her fists. Charlie looked at the woman and remembered his extra $1 in his wallet. Then he turned around, slid the card through, and pushed past the turnstile. He sat on the subway car and looked out the window. It had started drizzling, the raindrops leaving streaks on the outside windows as they raced down the glass. He swore to himself as he remembered he'd left his headphones back at the apartment. Nothing to do now but stare at his feet and avoid conversation. An older woman hobbled her way onto the car, her rickety shopping basket just making it through the closing doors. She shambled Charlie's way and plopped down next to him, her bags crowding the 3-person space. She started talking to him.
"My son wore long-sleeve shirts too. Strange for a modern man. Frilly, frilly, frilly." That's what I would say to him, because they always had frilly cuffs.
She continued to talk about her son, her husband, and the rest of her family. Apparently, she hadn't seen any of them in over 10 years. Whether they died or she just left one day was anyone's guess. Charlie never spoke a word. The automated voice blared from the overhead speakers that Charlie's stop was next. He got up. He held the pole to steady himself against the shifting car. She hadn't stopped talking the whole time. As the car started to slow, Charlie moved forward, towards the sliding doors. He felt something tugging on his sleeve. He turned around to see the old woman, arm outstretched, gripping his sleeve, begging him not to leave her alone again. He forcefully ripped his arm away from her feeble grasp, lowered his head to eye level, and said, "You ever touch me again, I'll rip your goddamn tongue out of your fucking mouth." Then he turned and walked out the sliding doors as they opened, leaving the old woman to sob quietly. He walked up the concrete steps and didn't bother shielding himself from the rain. The wind was picking up now. Hustlers selling umbrellas on the street corners were scrambling to hold onto their merch as it blew away. Charlie walked through the wind and the rain towards his apartment. He opened the first set of doors and then shoved his key into the next. 4 flights of stairs later, he turned the corner and faced a long hallway. His apartment was at the end of it. The window at the end of the hallway broadcast the show outside. The lightning and thunder was getting pretty bad. From 4 stories up, he could just barely make out waves starting to crest over the beach. They were getting bigger. He placed the key into the door of his apartment and went inside. He untied his shoes and dropped them next to the door. He stripped off his soaking clothes and threw them haphazardly over the wobbly shower curtain rod in his bathroom. A thunderclap rang out with the force of a mortar shell outside his block. What little art Charlie had on the walls fell off and shattered on the floor. Charlie walked dead-eyed into his bedroom, sat down at his desk, and pulled open the bottom drawer. He pulled out a large black towel. He fanned it out and set it under his chair. Then he reached his hand into the drawer again, farther back than before. He pulled out a small box with a handle on it. Dust had collected on its smooth surface. A gold inlay shone in the overhead light of his desk lamp. He tapped the top. "How much this time?" He spoke aloud. No response. He sighed. He looked out the window to his right. The sky, already dark from dusk and rain clouds, turned to pitch. Charlie saw this, picked up the box, and placed it on his left forearm. He clenched his fist and waited. Slowly, a small pillar of wood raised out of the top of the box. Charlie closed his eyes. Suddenly, 3 large metallic spikes burst from the bottom of the box and sunk themselves deep into Charlie's forearm. He grunted, watching the 2 spikes hold his forearm in place as the center spike pistoned in and out. The sky outside seemed to crack and the fissures spiderwebbed. A second pillar pushed its way out of the top of the box. Charlie threw up on the ground, but kept his fist clenched. A third pillar pushed up. The cracks in the sky bulged, seeming to hold back something massive. Charlie was starting to get dizzy. A 4th pillar pushed up. Foul-looking green liquid filled in the cracks in the sky. The spikes had exposed bone now. Charlie could see the cartilage and muscles quivering in the progressively larger gash. Blood that originally seemed to be absorbed by the spikes started to pool and spill out onto the black towel on the floor. The sky shattered. Endless and infinite darkness stared out. 3 continent-sized talons pushed their way through the tear. Green, pussy fluid sloughing off them in torrents. Charlie's vision was getting dark, but he grit his teeth and kept his fist clenched. A 5th pillar pushed out, and Charlie unclenched his fist. He looked back out the window. The sky was whole again. He flinched slightly as the spikes retracted. He weakly lifted the box off his forearm and placed it on the desk, blood dripping out onto the surface. He stumbled out of the chair and made his way to the bathroom, leaving a crimson trail of blood as he walked, clutching his arm. He fumbled his way through the most basic of stitching, smearing all the antibacterial cream squeezed out of a small bottle onto his forearm and wrapped the whole thing in a makeshift bandage. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. Scars in sets of 3 riddled his bare chest. After clumsily throwing water in his face from the sink with one hand, he slowly made his way back to the bedroom. As he sat down in the chair in front of his desk, he saw that the blood on the table from the box was gone. Weak and tired, he used the last of what he had left to drag himself over to his bed and lay down. The last thing he saw before he lost consciousness from exhaustion was the message smeared in red on the ceiling above him. In crude, barely legible words it read, "You can't protect them forever. I'll get in eventually."